Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast with coach, encourager, and strategist Anna McLaughlin. If you're a Christian woman who has big dreams rooted in an even bigger God, but most days those dreams feel completely out of reach, trust me, I get it. As a homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, investor, and all-around wearer of many hats, I am right there with you. And yet the Lord invites us to live out our God-given purpose now in the midst of the madness. So let's explore together how we can know our calling and walk in it today with clarity, with courage, with each other. It's time for you to live the life you love and love the life you live. Let's do this thing.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. I have a treat for you. I have Cathy Colver-Garland here, and we've already had 2 fantastic conversations that you didn't get to hear, but we saved the best for you. Cathy, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It has been fun.
It has been fun, and we're just getting started. We get to go through all the big stuff right now. Can you just give my people a little background about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so quickly, I have been saved since I was 4. So I won't tell you how many years, 40 plus years, and living a surrendered life since I was in my early 20s when the Lord spoke to me out loud, the only time I've ever heard him out loud. And he said, "If you don't want your life, I do." And from that point on, led me in a wonderful pursuit of him that led to absolute surrender. So I tell people, yes, I was saved. Yes, I was going to heaven, but I didn't become absolutely surrendered until I was in my 20s. And I also love theology, growing up in the church, a THD for a father, a pastor who lived his authentic life in front of all 9 of us children who love God and serve God. So, not all pastors can say that about their children. So, that's kind of a little quick history of my background. But on this side of things, I'm married, 2 kids, living in Roanoke, a little bit of an older mom. So, sort of the older mom tendency things, lack of energy, all those things. Sometimes I wish I had them when I was younger, but I do have a lot more patience. I know that. If I had had my kids in my early 30s, I think I would have been an extremely impatient person. But thank God for patience and wisdom that comes with age and perimenopause. But we won't get in there. So, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I think blunt, I tell you everything that's on my mind. I hold nothing back. And that's probably what most people know the most about me.
I love that. And I know we're going to get a little bit more into a very specific conversation that I cannot wait for. But talk to me first about this transition from saved to surrendered. Like, what has that journey been for you?
Yeah. When you grow up in the church, you come to a place where you have to accept it as your own. And I did that when I was 13. I went through this whole deconstruction and reconstruction process from about 13 to 14. I had told my parents, I'm not sure this Christian thing is for me. I had seen some church hurt, some hypocrisy, was in the whole questioning thing. Most people go through it in college. I went through it at 13. So my parents responded well. They were like, yes, we're going to look at all the religions, we'll study it. And then by the age of 14, I knew that Christ was real and that he wanted a relationship with me. And so everything built upon that. But I was doing the devotions. I was in ministry. I was serving the Lord, but I was also divorced. My first husband left me. I had had a miscarriage, and there's sort of lots of things happened. I had broke my neck and all these different things. And I came to a place, I was driving home, was doing well in my career, and I was miserable. And I said, in the middle of a Georgia storm, which is almost a typhoon, I was driving home, miserable, lonely. And I said, Lord, I don't want to commit suicide because I'm not that person. But if you could just make a tree fall on my car and just take me home, I would just be so grateful. And he spoke out of the driver's seat of my car, which about caused me to crash into a tree, quite frankly. And he said, if you don't want your life, I do. And I pulled over to the side of the road. And like a good Southern girl, I was a little upset with him. And I said, we're going to have a conversation. I have been serving you for 20 plus years and you've never spoken to me like this before. We're going to have a conversation. Now, we did not have a conversation audibly, but I recognized his voice finally in my head. It had differentiated itself from my voice, my mom's voice, my dad's voice, my pastor's voice, whatever the voices we have in our head. And so I said, what are you going to give me for this life? Because I'm a Southern woman. I'm going to get the best end of this deal. If you don't know that about Southern women, it's a fact. So I said, what are you going to give me? And he did not answer that one, but he said, trade me. And I had to trade him my boyfriend at the time, who was not a Christian, who was actually my boss. So that's an unwise relationship. He said, trade me this. Right. Trade me that. Trade me this, which is good because I think in church we use a term called yield, which is a traffic term, and I have no idea what that means in a Christian walk. But trade, I get. And so he led me, and I traded him this, and I traded him that. And then about 4 weeks later, he led me to Andrew Murray's book, Absolute Surrender. I highly recommend it. And if somebody wants a copy of it for free, contact me. I will get them a copy. It is a life-changing short book. And it says, all that I am, all that I'm not, and all that I ever hope to be, I surrender absolutely. And that was the power that I had looked for my whole life to sustain the walk with God through the highs and the lows, the camp highs when you go to camp and you're all on top of the world, and then the lows. But that absolute surrender has kept me on fire and pursuing revival, personal revival ever since.
Woo! Oh, that's so good. Okay, hold on. All that I am, all that I'm not, and all that I ever hope to be.
Right. I surrender absolutely. It's a white flag. It's like I wave the white flag. All that I am, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like I grew up pretty good. I didn't do all these things. So all that I am, all that I'm not, the good, the bad, the ugly, and all that I ever hope to be, I surrender absolutely.
That's so incredible because I think about, okay, I give you all I am, but then all I'm not. Is that where our regrets live? Is that what you mean? Of like, this is what I wish I was. This is
My
what I thought I could be.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. All my lack, all the things I know I'm not, all the things I wish I could be, all the hopes and dreams, they kind of live in that space. Absolutely. For me, it's also all the things I'm not. I could say, well, I wasn't a fornicator and ran off with my boyfriend or snuck out the window. But sometimes as a Christian, that hypocrisy or the knowledge that other than the grace of God, you would have been that way too, can be a stumbling block. I have to know that if it weren't for the grace of God, I would be just as bad as the worst sinner. I really would. And knowing that has to be a part of my surrender. And so all that I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all that I'm not, including the things that he saved me from, and all that I ever hope to be.
Oh, yeah. Because we have to let go of the future that we have in our mind's eye too. Because I do think that for me, there's this conditional piece of like, oh, by surrendering, here's what my life is going to look like as a result.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, oof, man, that'll preach. Wow. Okay, so take me here, Cathy. You've lived this life of surrender. You've lived this life walking in obedience to him. And it's led you, I'm sure, many different places, but the thread we're going to pull on today, probably primarily, but we'll see where all of this goes, is talking about this concept of revelationship that led you to write a book. So can you talk to us about Revelationship and what that is and what it means?
Right. Yes. So for me, growing up in the church and doing the right thing meant that I read the Bible multiple times. I had the certificates to prove it, right? You do the Bible in a year stuff and you get your little certificate. And I was contemplating doing that again. And dreading the Old Testament because it is full of the baguettes and the dry and the dusty and the sacrifices. I mean, let's get real. Now you get into Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and it's about as bloody as it can get. I mean, it's not fun reading. And so I was dreading it. And the Holy Spirit spoke to me. He said, look for me, look for Christ, look for God in the Old Testament. What am I doing? And it reminded me of Aslan. If you've read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, C.S. Lewis makes a point, and it's kind of hidden in there, but the protagonists, the children, they screw up if they don't look for Aslan first. They go off, they do their own thing, people die, wars are fought. But if they look for Aslan and join in with what he's doing, everything goes well. So I had imbibed that from reading the book. And I thought, okay, I can read the Old Testament looking for Christ, looking for the God who does things. And it's full. I have been in Genesis for 10 years. It is so full of the revelations of Christ in Genesis, revelations of God in Genesis. I'm the God who delivers you. I'm the God who sees you. I'm the God who rescues you. I'm the God who makes covenant. I'm the God who makes consequences because of your actions. Like all these things. And he says it, I'm the God who. So I started looking for the God who, and then I was sharing that with some interns at my dad's church. And he was writing the words that God reveals himself for the purpose of relationship. And when he did that, he actually had a brain fart and he wrote Revelationship. And we're like, wait a second, new word.
Yes.
That's exactly what we mean. God revealing himself as he pursues us for relationship. And so we wrote the book to train people's eyes to see God revealing himself in their life. The second book that's coming in 6 months or so is called The God Who.
Oh, I love that. That was actually, side note, there was an earlier iteration of this podcast that only had like 1 or 2 episodes recorded called The God Who Sees Me. Because
Really?
because of that moment between Rahab and the father. Because ultimately it's the first piece of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. First, we have to sit at the Father's feet and we have to know who he says we are, who he is, right? Really who he is, and because of that, who he says we are, right? In that order. And only from that place can we know and walk in our purpose in a way that's in any way fruitful, meaningful, and true. And so I love the God who's so many things. And when we start there, it's like every question is answered by knowing who he is.
You're right. It's the antidote to what ails us. Everything that we go through, anything we go through, knowing and being known by God is the thing that will keep us. It's the thing that will make us thrive. And whatever we need is found in the nature of God. And that's why theology is so practical. I think we lost something when the scholars made theology their domain. It is highly practical to study God, to know him, because by understanding, like you said, his character and his attributes, we learn our character or what he wants us to be or how he sees us or what we're supposed to do, our destiny. So, for example, if you have listeners who are struggling with this very practical anxiety, okay, maybe it's anxiousness about their past, maybe it's anxiousness about their current circumstances. Maybe it's anxiousness about the future. I mean, the world looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket as fast as possible. So we can get anxious about the future. So what is the antidote to that anxiety? They say anxiousness and anxiety is on, it's 1,000% as compared to right before COVID. So we've been hit by this bomb of anxiety. So how do we cope with that? Well, there's a lot of different things, and clinical anxiety needs help. Like you need to go to a professional. But the typical mom who's just dealing with anxiety from past, present, or future circumstances can find the antidote in God's character by saying to themselves, God is, let's fill in the blank, omnipresent. Because he is present in the past and the present and the future, all at the same time, for all time, and time for him is just always now. God never has a past. He doesn't have a future. He's still in the past and he's in the future all at the same time. This is kind of mind-blowing to us linear humans. But if I get a hold of the fact that God is in the future and I'm there too, and he has the victory and I do too, and he's also present with me and he will never leave me nor forsake me. And believe it or not, he was in my past, redeeming it, moving in it. And technically, he's still establishing the foundations of the earth, knitting you and I together in our mother's womb and in the future, all at the same time. He doesn't just foreknow my future or know how it's going to work out for me. He's already there. And I can rest that he has won the victory and I'm going to look like Christ. When all is said and done, when all the craziness is over, I will look like Christ.
Oh, it's so true. Like, I just think about, so one of the foundational verses for this podcast is the parable of the talents, kind of that whole passage. And where does the one talent servant go wrong? He does not understand the father. He doesn't understand the master. And he says, I know you to be a hard man. And he saw what God did, but he didn't understand or recognize why he did what he did. Like, yes, I gathered where I sowed no seed because I'm abundant, because I'm limitless, really, when it comes to the Father, not because I'm like pecuniary or stealing from anybody or anything like that. And so out of his fear of the Father, because he didn't know the Father, he hid what he had. And for us, that's our life. That's, it's just, I mean, really, it comes back to that moment in the car for you. And I actually had a similar moment in my 20s where I asked the Lord over the course of a summer. I spent some time going, can you just take me out? Like, how can I just not be here anymore? And it was that same thing of, I had gotten a tattoo on my hip and it was a cross with the word always across it. And I remember every time I get in the shower, that thing would like mock me, right? Like always means always. Always means forever. Like, it is all covered. I'm with you. You'll see this through to the other side because of who I am. And that little ink on my side really called me out of one of my moments of deepest darkness, to the point where now when I go through much harder valleys of the shadow than I was ever in my 20s, which of course so much of my despair was of my own making for me personally, then it's never gotten to that point again because of how I know him to be. And so I just think what you're saying is so beautiful. It's like when we know him, it really answers every question that we have. And we're able to live a life that's fruitful, no matter the circumstances that we face.
It's true. Absolutely.
So take me through, like, what do we find when we read this book that you've written in this devotional? What does it look like practically to uncover this relationship journey that you're inviting people on?
Well, the book has a certain number of chapters, and each chapter kind of takes another way that God reveals himself. And we could have kept going because God reveals himself in art and beautiful things. And so we didn't put those in. We're just trying to train people to start looking. And by the end of it, you'll be trained to start to see him moving. So God reveals himself in suffering. I deal with a lot of people who suffer, whether it's suffering in divorce or suffering through sickness or something like that. God reveals himself. And if we're not trained to know that, we will turn away from the one thing who will come and comfort us during suffering. So a lot of people say, and they repeat C.S. Lewis, who said, suffering is a very good teacher. I'm paraphrasing. And it's true, because when you're suffering, you don't care how you look, you don't care how your house looks, and all the things don't matter, because what matters is the one thing that's in front of you, whether it's, again, sickness or grief or something like that. So suffering reveals truth. God is in truth. Wherever you find truth, you're going to start to find God actively moving. So when people come to me and they're suffering, we can address whatever's in front of them. God is doing that thing. And by the end of their suffering, and we are promised as Christians to suffer, then they've learned that they've proven to themselves actually that they can depend upon God. And I think that's where you have to be trained. And the church has done not a very good job of training people to suffer well and to look for God in suffering. So that's one of the ways, that's just an example of one of the chapters.
Oh, okay. But we got to hang with this for a second, because this is, when my father died, I remember everybody wanted to help me through it to the other side, right? Let's help you get through this. And, and that was very sweet, but it was like the loss itself was one of the, for me, and I still am like, Lord, what was that? Because it was almost a, this is going to sound weird. It was almost a joy to walk it out with the Father, because for in this particular suffering, and I come back to this conversation about my father quite often, because I feel like it's just such an archetype for the bigger offering from the Lord. But my dad's passing, he was paralyzed for 25 years from chemotherapy, but basically a chemotherapy side effect. And so his death was always kind of this larger than life. He was about to die any moment. The wind blows wrong and he could go down. Like there was a lot of kind of like trauma that resulted in a lot of fear that I lived with for, kind of almost without knowing. It was like a little hum in the background for decades, this idea of how will I survive his passing, because it had become this larger than life, thing that just hung over my head all the time. And so then when he died, it's like, whoosh, here comes this hand to hold me, and I was okay. And the thing I thought would take me out didn't. And so there really became this point before the Lord where I was like, what can man do to me? Like the worst, supposedly the worst happened. And of course now I'm like, I can list a lot of other things that I worry about more now. But at the time, that was the big shadow that arched over my life for so long. What can man do to me? And so it was actually through the suffering that I received the gifts. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Would you add more to it? Talk to me about that.
That's exactly what I mean by suffering. I mean, the fact is, you proved that God was going to never leave your side, and that there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And, you said those people were sweet trying to help you through it, but that's not suffering well. Suffering well is, and we are talking about a tragedy here. Okay. So there's suffering because you did something stupid. There's also suffering because somebody's been unjust to you. And the God who sees Hagar in the desert, there's different kinds of suffering, but we're talking about a tragedy here. God didn't send the tragedy to you, but he said, I will be there with you. And he was there. And so nobody can take that away from you. For the rest of your life, you will know that the faithfulness of God to keep his promise to be with you is sure, and that you're not going to be the first person in the history of the universe that he doesn't come through for.
Yes. But it is like, we need to know it. There comes a level where it's like, we need to know it for ourselves, right? And what you said was really profound, because one of the things that gave me the eyes to see, okay, he'll be with me in heartbreak. But there are other sufferings too. There's the suffering of injustice. There's the suffering of bad decisions. There's the suffering of just like that kind of malaise of, is this all there is?
Yes.
And it's like, I wonder if, because I've had some circumstances where I'm like, well, you brought me through this one, but now I've got a new one and it doesn't feel the same somehow. But I wonder if some of it's just both the different categories and the deeper level of just knowing the Father. It's like, okay, I know you here at this shallower level, or at this unrelated place. I need to know you now in this new space too. So we're going to have to walk it all the way through. And there's really there's no shortcut, I think, on suffering. If we try to take a shortcut, we've just brushed it under the carpet, and it shows up in other ways where it's just like becomes that festering wound.
Yep, absolutely, it does. And that's a bit of a problem. Growing up in the South, as a pastor's daughter, and seeing funerals, multiple funerals. I've been to more funerals than most people. And the difference between a Caucasian white person's funeral and a Black person's funeral is vitally different. So in a white person's funeral, Everybody is doing everything to make the attendees comfortable. The wife who lost her husband is doing her best to make everybody else who's attending comfortable. And I find that to be ridiculous. That's not her job. Her job is to be authentically sitting with her loss. And this whole thing of careful holding it in kind of thing is not helpful. But then you go to a Black funeral, and the mom who loses her child, I'm thinking of one in particular, she threw herself to the ground in front of her and she wailed. But everyone came around her and wailed with her. That is the right response. She lost her child. We're not supposed to just show up and eat food and go on about our business. She's supposed to feel that. And so for me, that was very eye-opening as a child, that the authenticity of what you're going through needs to be shown and shared with the world. And then everybody needs to come around and join in. We're not supposed to say, keep a stiff upper lip or pull yourself up or you're going to get through this. That is so unhelpful. We need to sit with the person and mourn with them. And those other mothers came around and wailed with her. And that is the appropriate response to losing your child.
Yes. Okay. So talk to me about this though, because here's one of the things that I notice that I'm not quite sure what to do with. Say that at the white woman's funeral, or the child's funeral, the white woman gives herself permission to wail. I think of how many times in deep grief others have kind of like, I can almost picture it, like pick her up and take her in another room, get her quiet. You know what I mean? And so I feel like there's almost become this thing where it's like, I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to fall apart in front of others. But then the others are like, oh, no. Like, let's just take it elsewhere. So what's the work? Do we say, I'm just going to be loud and throw myself on the floor anyway, and recognize that some people may not be able to hang? Because I think that's kind of what's created, especially there's a huge conversation around wholehearted living and authenticity.
Yes.
Brene Brown has kind of opened this very public conversation for us to talk about shame and grief and loss and all of that. And so now we're in this middle of the story where we know that there needs to be this place for this authentic reckoning, but there aren't very many sacred spaces where we really have the invitation to show up and throw ourselves on the floor and wail. So what does that look like? What's the next step?
The next step is being trained, the church training themselves again to return to that safe place where people can be authentically undone. If people think that they're going to experience the presence of God, now we're moving to something positive, even the presence of God or revival or something like that, and it's not going to get messy, it makes no sense to me. Because if I came to the Lord later in life and I had been a hellion and I realized how much I had been saved from, you would not be able to keep me quiet. I would be rushing the altar, like the sudden dawning on my mind. I can see why people rush the altar and they're like, oh, let's be orderly. God is orderly. I'm like, yeah, but his order is vastly different than your order. It does not look anything like your order.
Hey mama, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you gave yourself some white space? I am not talking about a trip to the bathroom alone or even the grocery store. When's the last time you had what I like to call some no one needs me time? For homeschooling entrepreneurs, time like this isn't a luxury. It's actually a key component to a healthy business, homeschool, and family life. So, if you're ready for your next respite, whether it's you by yourself, you and your spouse, or a family trip, join us at our peaceful haven, Just Like Paradise, located on gorgeous Oak Island, North Carolina. This 3-bedroom house is just a short walk to the ocean and nearby restaurants. It has a screened-in back porch with fireplace that is to die for, hot tub, and even a fire pit if you're feeling ambitious. Book through the link in the show notes, and then you have a unique discount code, podcast100, to get a $100 discount on your stay as a thank you for being one of my listeners. Get your next getaway on the calendar today.
And so we have to get back to a place where the church can be that safe place and let people respond properly to what is actually happening and change our understanding of what a proper response is. Proper response is not tea and cakes. Proper response is what is real. And the seat of our emotions, like where we experience God in the Bible, there are numerous people who show emotionally what they felt. Even Christ cried when his friend died. And that is the appropriate response. He didn't just say, I'm going to raise him from the dead. He cried because of the pain he felt. And I think somewhere Stoicism kind of hijacked Christianity. And I know Paul dealt with it a lot, but Stoicism, and this is what people like Brené Brown have done well, is to get us to move past this Stoicism. Stoicism in Christianity does not make a holy religion or a holy faith. It makes a dead one. And so God gave us emotions. Yes, we're not supposed to be led by them. They're not supposed to be the king. But when we're going through something, connecting to God requires emotion and to not lie. Like hiding your emotions sometimes is a lie or control because you don't want to, you don't want to let people see the real you. So letting go and letting God have control instead of you have control is very much a part of being authentically standing before the throne. When Isaiah encountered the throne of God, he was undone, which is the right response. When John encountered Christ in Revelation, he fell down dead. That is the right response when you come up against a holy God. I have a feeling the very first time I see God, I'm going to be overwhelmed with his holiness just from reading the Bible. I think I do pretty good in a righteous life. Like Isaiah, he's like, I'm a pretty good man. But when he encountered God, he saw how unholy he really was. And he was undone. I'm like, God, go ahead and undo me now so that when I encounter you, I'm okay with the fact that I'm going to be undone.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me when you're saying this of I received this insight when I was going through my training as a life coach. It talked about when we fear an experience, what we're actually afraid of is our own emotional response and the emotions we'll need to feel to process that experience.
Yes.
So it's like when we think about public speaking, we're actually afraid of feeling the fear. We're afraid of feeling the potential embarrassment or the shame or the judgment and criticism or whatever it is, like to step out and open ourselves up. And so when we can give, like for me, and this is what I'm doing now, and I'd love your thoughts on this. For me, I have about half a dozen people that I can totally fall apart with. Like I can call them and sob. I can say exactly what I'm thinking.
Yes.
I can tell them all the lies that I'm believing, and I can submit to their wisdom and their wise counsel when I'm totally out of line, right? And so for me there are this very small handful of very safe containers that see me at my absolute worst on the worst days in all the raw authenticity. So, and from there, I can actually be pretty dang honest in any old space. Like on here, I talk about like places that I've failed or whatever, like there's the safety to be somewhat revelatory, somewhat vulnerable, even relatively like pretty vulnerable, because I have that safe container where in those precious moments where it's all just raw and real, they get to see me. So so I think about like falling apart at the altar, right? In the midst of loss. That's like hundreds of people, right? I've got a half a dozen. What does it look like, those levels? Is that how you would structure like vulnerability and walking through loss and challenge and joy and all of that? Or do you say like just let it all hang out? Like what would you say to that process?
I think you're right. You have to start smaller. But I'm thinking church-wide, jumping to church-wide. You're right. I highly recommend finding one person that you can walk this walk with and authentically share yourselves. An accountability partner is what we called them in the 60s and the 70s. I don't know what they're called now. And then a discipleship group is what you're talking about, where you're authentically sharing your sinfulness, your patterns, your thoughts, your lack, and they're reaching into what the word says, what God says, maybe prophetically, even like telling you this is gonna what it be gonna be what it looks like given enough time, whatever it is, and you're accepting their instruction, which is what the early church did. As soon as someone came into the faith, they went through a very long catechism, and then at the culmination of that, they would get their baptism. So through that catechism, guess what it was about? It was about who God is, what Christ said. And so as they went through it, they even went through deliverance, which is, of course, a huge conversation about things right now because deliverance ministry is finally returning to the church. But they would go through, they would learn, hey, you can't do witchcraft. Why? Because God said so. And here's why God said so. And then they say, oh, well, I did go through witchcraft. I was just doing it right the other day because my mother-in-law made me mad and I cast a spell on her. That's how prevalent that sort of stuff was back then. And so they would say, okay, well, let's get rid of the spirit of witchcraft or whatever. I don't think they had names for it. They just got rid of it. And then they would have the next day, you would have your catechism, and then it would reveal whatever it is, and they'd confess it and they'd deal with it, and then on and on and on. And then they would get baptized, and sort of that would be the final sort of situation where you're in the faith. At that point, they would consider you to be a believer. So we lost that, right? Constantine set up the church, pushed all those weird things out to the fringe. If you wanted to cast a spell on somebody, you had to go in the forest and find the old lady. It wasn't as common as it was when the disciples and Jesus walked. I mean, when they went through the marketplace, there were people who were selling spells. That was how common it was. Everybody
Wow.
had books of magic, where they talk about burning those books of magic in certain towns and cities. So what I'm saying by this is we're returning to some of this. We're returning to deep, authentic discipleship, which includes living together, eating together, talking about Christ, addressing issues as it rises, getting healing for our bodies, our minds, trauma, etc., and going together to do that. And so you have a small group. I wouldn't call that too small, by the way. I think that's a great size. And if we had 50 of those in your church, you'd have a good sized church.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I love that. And it's amazing what you talked about the history of how people were truly trained up, and we've lost that. And I would almost say we've kind of like uh, created a little bit of a celebrity culture within the church of like new converts, where it's like, listen to this amazing testimony, and put people up in front to speak,
Oh
like
yeah.
from very early in their faith, and you're just like,
Oh,
oh no.
that is so bad. You are so right. I worked with a group in Atlanta where we rescued people from the sex industry and we worked with them. So a lot of trauma counseling. And as soon as they came to the faith, they were talking to churches and making the rounds. And I was like, this is not good. They're not healed completely. And yes, I know you got to raise funds and everything, but please let's let them have some time. And I've kept in touch with many of those women, and it was damaging to them. I have to say, we can't jump the gun. Discipleship has to be a necessary part of our walk.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for me, I came to the Lord when I was 11 years old, but in a non-believing home. So was completely, no discipleship, no guidance, was living very much in the world, although I was saved. And then when I got in a good church, I became kind of one of the stories where it's like, oh, look, kind of prodigal daughter comes back in the fold, and having that microphone. So, and I was obviously, I'm kind of a fan of the microphone. Like I've always been a talker. And so being put forward to share testimonies and all of that really created a lot, and of course, unwittingly on their part, but it created a lot of inner conflict with me, where when I was then reckoning with the consequences of my sin from, just a year prior or whatever it was, a very short period of time. And kind of the continual sanctifying that I needed to walk through and healing from being a first generation Christian in my home. It was like, but I thought I'd kind of arrived, and what's wrong with me? And so that guilt and shame was just all the harder to walk through because I'd been put up as an example and then felt that I'd kind of fallen from grace in my own mind. And so I see the wisdom and just the beauty in this, in the sense of, let's give this strong kind of quiet foundation for people who are coming into the faith, and let's normalize the fact that there's going to be some stuff to clean up if you're coming in from from the world, especially. So that's profound. Okay, so I feel like I'm like, we could keep going here, but we have to change directions to one other thing. And this was based on our first conversation. You shared something so profound that was really, it's just lived in my brain since we talked. And I found it really healing. You shared some insights about the bondage of balance. Can you talk about that? And I just, so many of our listeners are women, and this is going to be such a gift for them in particular, because I think there's this message of like, you got to have balance. So talk to me about that, the bondage of balance.
Yes. Okay. So your listeners may be shocked to find out that balance is not biblical. Okay. We'll just put that out there. It's actually a Hindu concept. And it's a problem. God does not call us to balance. The word balance isn't even in the Bible, except when you're talking about actual weights. Okay. When God says, I don't like these unbalanced weights. Okay, he does not talk about balancing things. He actually doesn't even call us to prioritize. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. But I believe that this false burden of achieving balance, some utopian situation where everything is balanced and all the spinning plates are spinning all at the same time, this utopian, unachievable place of balance has actually put us in a place of bondage where we lie awake at night guilty for all the things that we were not to all the people we failed that day. So there's a scripture in Paul where he says, I'm all things to all people. He's talking, I'll just release your listeners. He's talking about evangelism. He is not talking about raising children, being married, and being in ministry and having a job and all the things that you need to be in order to achieve balance. Okay, so this is a bondage. God calls us to stability. That's in 2 Peter 3:17. He calls us to rest. That's in Genesis 2:2. He calls us to peace, which is in Psalm 29:11. Okay, so those are the things he calls us to. We live in seasons. Seasons is a very biblical kind of term. And he calls us to have boundaries. Christ was excellent at setting boundaries, and you can follow his example. When things got to be too much for him, you're thinking to yourself, was it really too much for him? He's fully God and fully man? Yes, it got too much for him. He went away. He left the crowds. There were plenty of people who still needed to be healed, but he had to reconnect with the Father. He didn't want to lose that connection. We would be wise to follow that example. If he needs it, how much more so do we? So, balance has taken over our lives. I think there's this whole, I've got to give myself to this thing and that thing. I saw at the early on a time cover, and it had this woman. She was sitting in a position, and it was actually a goddess, a Hindu goddess, and in each hand was all the different roles that we play as women. And I do think men can do a better job of just prioritizing 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, because their life isn't thrown to smithereens in a day. If I did that, life happens to me. I'm going to have to suddenly take my child who stuck a Lego up her nose and it's bleeding to the ER. Like, that does not happen for the typical male on a day. It happens to us mothers. And so we're like, oh, I didn't do my devotions today. Oh, I didn't eat healthy today. I didn't work out today. I also didn't do this today. And then we go in our bedroom, fall asleep exhausted. And as we're falling asleep, we feel guilty because we haven't done all the things. So I think it's a bondage. It's a Hindu concept. It's not a biblical one. We're actually called to season. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we need to think about our lives like a wheel. Christ is the center. And on every spoke would be all the things we want to do, things we haven't done, things we must do, all the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and all the roles. Like I'm in ministry, I might be a life group leader, or all these different things. And at certain points in our life, as we're rolling along, certain things will be under pressure. They're the ones that are hitting the ground, where the rubber meets the road, as we've heard. Okay, so in that season of life, the other things are not important and they have to be let go. I have to focus on the season. So I'm in a season of elementary school kids. That is a very different season than when they were toddlers, and it's a very different season from when they're teenagers. There are different time requirements when they're a toddler. There are I'm going to be chasing after them when they get their license, right? So seasons are very biblical. And if I have to say devotions is, oh God, help me, the prayer I pray as I throw them in the car and take them to the ER, while I eat a granola bar and toss one at each one of them, because we are not eating healthy that morning, we are just going to the ER, I have to give myself a break. That's okay.
Oh, I love this. It reminds me, someone said to me years ago, she was single, I was married with little kids. She said, whatever season you're in, there's just so much of it. And I never forgot it. I was like, that's it. That's it. Like when you've got little kids, there's just so much of them and they're always there and they always need you. And I was just talking to someone today who's got a baby, a 1-month-old. He's like kind of trying to structure his day and all this. I'm like, dude, give it no judgment for the next 5 to 11 months. It always took us a year to get used to every new soul that joined our house, but I feel like, yeah, the average person seems to be able to hang in 6 months. But it is such a transition. So yeah, like set up kind of a rough guideline. It's going to change in 2 weeks. Sorry. Like the
And then the
change is
time
just so
change.
rapid.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And the time is going to change. That always threw off naps for us. And we were just like,
Yes.
really? Can we
Yeah,
please just get rid of those? You're
I
right.
know.
The rhythms and things like that. I think in balance, people use words like balance for, hey, we're giving both sides of the same story. That's not balance. That's fairness.
Yes.
So there's actually better words. Inherent in the word balance is loss, compromise, trade off, half measure, making equal. So if I'm at my job, I need to be fully present at my job, or else I'm not being a very good employee. When I'm with my husband, I need to put down the phone and be fully present with my husband. When I'm with my children, I need to be fully present with my children. That's not spreading myself thinly over all the different things. I'm actually putting first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. I'm pursuing Christ, and all the other things are being added to me by his spirit, not by me. And while I'm with someone, I'm being fully present with them. And that makes me give my all while I'm there.
Oh, I never thought of balance as deficit the way you're talking about it. But you're right, because if we're evening the scales, we're constantly evening the scales, then one can't be weighted too heavy. And what you're saying is actually Christ calls us to the opposite. We're called to be all in where he has placed us in that moment.
Exactly. That's right.
Oh man, that's so good. Oh. And what I love about just our brief conversation about it when we talked before and then revisiting it now. And listen, friend, I hope that you are hearing this. The invitation that Cathy is extending is to release all these expectations.
Absolutely.
There, and I love it just brings us back to Ecclesiastes, like to everything there is a season. And that may mean, and I literally was like just saying yesterday to my husband, I'm so frustrated by how I'm eating right now. No, I'm not taking very good care of myself, but we've just been through an incredibly challenging time. And it has taken every ounce of our mental and emotional energy to weather this time. And so, it's not the time for me to, pop out of bed first thing in the morning and go lift a bunch of weights and go for a run and do all this stuff. It's like time for a little creamer in my tea to just feel cozy and safe and cuddle up with my Bible and just receive the word of God. And if that means that, maybe I look a little bit squishier than I did before, it's just a season. And
It's
then
a
there's this season where I come out and I'm like, okay, now we can do all the weights and do all the things, and it's okay. But instead, because I think that pursuit of balance, it's an open door for guilt and shame. I can see that. Oh, okay. All right. So when we find ourselves trying to be all the things and do all the things, like what are some things that you found, just real practical? And I think this is where we'll kind of wrap things up. What are some things that you found kind of call you out of that stage, or have called other people out of that state of like, I'm trying to do all the things, back into that place of seasons and grace?
one of the things I have found is that we have to totally lay hold of Christ's rest when he says, "Take my yoke upon you, my burden is easy, my yoke is light." So we have to take a hold of that and believe it. I think when God instructed Israel when they left Egypt to rest on the seventh day, he had to do it because they've been working 7 days, 24 hours. They had a slave mentality. We are not slaves. We are part of the household of God. And he has called us into rest. And actually, when he rested on the seventh day, as an example, he never did pick up his work again. We're supposed to be entering into this eternal rest. And everything we do is supposed to be coming from that rest. I'm not saying we're perfect. And I'm not saying it doesn't take practice, but like everything else, it requires the Holy Spirit, a combination of truth and spirit, in order to make it happen for us in this practicing. I do think also casting down lies can be very helpful. So when I think about this bondage, I think it comes from a lie that we've got to separate the sacred parts of our life from the secular parts of our life, which Satan really wants us to do. He wants to keep those separate so that our Holy Spirit within us and the holiness that is coming out from the inside out doesn't infect the workplace or doesn't infect all these other areas of our life. He's like, well, keep it segmented in the church, keep it segmented in your ministry. And I think that leads to a double-mindedness and some of the anxiety and things that we encounter in ourselves. I know for my purposes is a double-mindedness that James warns us against. You said it, we got to be all in.
Oh, that's so good. Okay. So, so you talked about separating the secular from the sacred. There's this beautiful line that just came to mind that's a little bit of a different context from where it came from, but Henry Nouwen, or Henri Nouwen is probably how it's pronounced, as a Catholic priest, and he talked about this time of commune with a friend of his, I think a former student, and they talked and they laughed and they shared, and then the conversation just kind of dwindled down to silence. They sat in each other's presence for an extended period of time. And then there just kind of came a moment of, yeah, the time is done. The moment is, yeah, it's time to part ways. And they embraced. And he looked at his friend and he said, from this point forward, every step between us is holy ground.
Hmm.
And I just think about when we are truly bringing the Father into every moment of our lives, that the God who, right, the God who sees me, the God who establishes covenant, the God who redeems, the God who restores,
Yeah.
then we can't help but have all of these spaces in which we live, and then the kind of points of connection with fellow believers, and then the spaces that expand between the two of us as we part ways. It's touched by the divine. And ultimately, that's what we're called to do. Like, thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's actually our commission, to bring
is.
his kingdom here.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So Cathy, thank you. Thank you for inviting the divine into this space and for just sharing your wisdom. And honestly, like, being a lifter of burdens. When you share these aspects of what does it look like to suffer well, we kind of carry these packs on our back when we don't suffer well, and we just lug it around from place to place, and it shows up in conversations with our kids and conflicts with our spouses because we haven't dealt with the thing all the way through. We didn't give ourselves the permission to lose ourselves when everybody was around and ready to hold the space to their own ability. And then we just walk around like the walking wounded. And then so too, we layer on top of that, I should be exercising, and I should be, doing devotionals with the kids every morning, and I should have a clean sink at the end of the day. And the more we're on social media, the more of those shoulds we come up with, because gosh, they're everywhere. So this permission that you've granted is such a gift. And for you who are listening, I hope you've received it. So Cathy, thank you so much. Any parting words that you want to share? Oh, tell everybody how they can find you, because they have to.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Revelationship.net. And the blog is there. I've been writing a blog for about 10 years. Concepts like we just discussed are on there a lot of times. And then people also reach out to me to talk about the hard things, not just that they're going through, but the hard things in the Bible. Sometimes there are some hard words or hard stories, and they don't understand, should I be following this? What is this, for example, Sodom and Gomorrah or something like that. And they don't understand, and they want to know God better, but these things can be stumbling blocks for them. So they can reach out. There's 100 different ways to find me on Revelationship.net. And then the book is there. And there's also a free devotional guide, which you can get when you get the book. You just get a free download of that. But then I also have what we talked about before this podcast, this beautiful 250-page devotional guide. And I think a lot of people are telling me, even if they've served God for 40 years, it will reset where they are now and give them sort of a new compass direction. And I like that concept of a reset, for our walk with God. We need it.
We do need it. Oh, Cathy. Well, I think we've gotten a start to that already through this conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to you who are listening for being here. Please connect with Cathy. And until next time, remember, you've got this, because he's got you.
Friend, thank you so much for listening to this most recent episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. So listen, the whole idea behind this mission is that when we endeavor to be brave with our lives, we need to do it together. Belonging is key. So if you resonated with the message from this episode, share it with a friend. Do it together. Thank you again. And never forget, you've got this because he's got you.